Hey guys, welcome back to another kind of tutorial video, but just kind of giving you an update on specs for Cyberpunk. Here it is after 8 years. We've been waiting, and finally it's upon us. It's got some bugs for sure, and it's got a lot of performance issues. So I'm here to give you guys my rundown of the best specs that I have found to give me the smoothest performance. I've spent a couple hours for sure going over lots of tweaks, changing my Nvidia actual settings, and changing in-game settings. So this isn't a demo or a preview version of Cyberpunk. This is the full release version with the day 1 patch and the 1.04 quick patch that was put out on December 11th to fix a lot of bugs in in-game I guess quirks, essentially, and errors that they had, and a couple console fixes. This is, of course, on the PC. I just want to give you guys a quick rundown of the settings and what worked for me to get the smoothest 1440p and below settings. I'll go over what I've gotten on 4K because it's pretty much the same. Unfortunately, I don't have a 4K gaming monitor that hits over 60 hertz, so for that, it's really hard for me to test. When your monitor is not really designed for gaming and it's designed more for workflow, it's really hard to get accurate numbers to give you. The monitor I am using, though, however, is an Acer monitor. I'll post the exact model up in a quick text box here, and also all my specs listed below on what I'm running. I have some very high-end specs and I have some very medium specs. For example, my graphics card that I'm using in this is a 3090 Nvidia Founders Edition 3090 graphics card, and my processor, however, is a 3700X. I do want the 5950X. Unfortunately, scalpers and everyone else has destroyed that market, so for now, I'm still sitting on my 3700X. I'm not a big fan of Intel processors. I think AMD dominates, so I'm going to maintain with them, but getting processors right now for not ridiculous prices, it's just not a thing. The 5950X is running a $2,000 price tag right now on Amazon used. So without further ado, let's get into it. Obviously, we're going to go to Escape. We're going to go to our settings menu here, and we're going to take a look. You can see down here in the bottom left, I kind of have the Steam set up for my frames. I don't really know how accurate this is, but this is kind of what I base mine off of on what I'm at. Sound controls and gameplay, you can obviously adjust those as you need to. The only thing I will go into in gameplay, and one thing that I can tell you will obviously help your performance, obviously if you don't have this on an M.2, an NVENC, or an SSD, and you have it on a standard hard drive, because money permits, and that's cool, you're definitely going to want to put slow Hdr mode on. That's going to increase your performance boost by a good percentage, just in testing that I've done. Crowd density does make a big difference. However, I prefer the crowd density. It is a single-player game and is meant to be immersive in a realism atmosphere, so that's what I'm going for here, but obviously with good performance. So if you do put the crowd density down to low or medium, you will see an increase. I know generally when I put mine down to medium and low, which I tested last night, I got about a 5 to 6 frames increase, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it can be when you're teeter-tottering right on that 60 FPS slot. Sorry, I'm taking some drinks in between so my throat doesn't get all kind of dried out. Graphics tab is going to be the big one, and your video tab. So let's start in video tab because it's not as intensive. And here I have 3 monitors. I'm using my main monitor, which is a 0. VSync I do have off, and my maximum FPS I have off because I don't want it to be limited. And Windows mode, obviously, I keep in full screen. I never recommend Windows borderless or windowed, just because if you click off the screen, it can cause issues, and you're not getting, in my opinion, I've always dropped frames in doing that on any game that I play. My resolution is 2560 by 1440. That's the max that my resolution of this monitor goes. However, you see I have an extra little slot here. I can take my monitor all the way up to 3620 by 2036. Really odd. I'll go over that a little bit later in the video on why that's a thing. You could use it, but I don't really think it makes much of a performance difference. With this monitor, I generally go between 2560, 1920, and 1080. I still think to this day 2560 by 1440 is the sweet spot for gaming. I don't think 1080p monitors are really it anymore. Now that I've played on 1440p for about this last year, I cannot go back to 1080p. My eyes just get strained when I watch it, and it doesn't look very good, especially for the amount of power that my graphics card puts out and what my monitor is capable of at 1440 at 144 hertz. There's no reason for me to. HDR mode I do not have on as my monitor is not capable of it. And let's get over to the graphics. So in the graphics menu, you have a lot of quick presets. You have custom. You're going to have low, medium, high, ray tracing, medium, ray tracing, ultra. I don't really want to change mine because I want to keep mine to what it is right now. But these are the best settings that I've found. Obviously, if you highlight over it, it's going to tell you essentially what each one of these does. Most of them, yeah, we're like, what in the hell? I have no idea what a lot of these things are, but it kind of will explain it to you. Film grain, I turn off. I personally don't think it makes any difference in any part of the game that I have seen up until this point. So if I can turn it off and not notice a difference, I know I'm getting a better performance boost for sure. Not always the case, but well, I'll go over that real quickly actually. So if you go back into, is it in graphics? It is in graphics. Okay, actually, so we'll get to there in a second. Chromatic Aberration, I have on. Depth of field, I have on, obviously. Basically, one thing I've noticed with depth of field is if a character is walking away from me, for example, if they have a book bag, they'll have design on it. The farther away they get, then the book bag will disappear, or the design will actually disappear. Sorry about that, get a message. Lens flare I have off. Reason being, it looks cool, but it really gets in my way when I'm driving. And it's caused me to wreck and cause accidents and hit people by accident and get chased by the police. Not a big fan of lens flare. It looks cool and it does add that depth of realism, but it blinds me on my monitor. Not a big fan. I think without it, you're fine. Motion blur, believe it or not, in most games I turn motion blur off by default. I hate it. Except this game. If I turn motion blur all the way down, the game looks weird. It doesn't look right. It doesn't play right. It doesn't seem very real. And I actually drop about 10 to 15 frames if I have motion blur off. Recommendation if you have a lower end or mid PC to keep it on low. You will get a performance boost. Try it out on high. Again, all those settings in here are subjective. These are my settings that work for me on my PC. I just want to give you an insight onto what I'm getting with the specs that I do have. Because I know some people are in the same boat as me where they have a mid-grade CPU and a really high-end GPU, or vice versa. Because I've watched people who have 5950Xs with 3090 graphics card, and they are getting on average about another 10 to 15 frames per second than I am in their review videos. So for me, motion blur I keep on high. It gives me the best overall. Contact shadows I have on. Improved facial lighting geometry I have on. And I don't know how to say this word essentially, but this is what creates obviously your edges or your angles. I want it to be as smooth as possible, so I have it on 16. Everything else I have on high, minus screen space reflections. I can set all of mine to ultra, and I only take probably a 2 to 3 frames per second dip. But honestly, I don't notice any difference when I've changed these up to ultra, the ones that do have the capability of doing that. So when I change them up to ultra, there's no point if I'm not gaining anything from that. I don't tell any difference in any screen that I've changed. I've looked while it's raining, while it's not raining. I've looked at night, I've looked at day, I've looked in high crowd density places, low crowd density places, in alleyways, at the sky, at the ground, at reflections. It doesn't matter. I haven't noticed any difference with any of these, essentially. If I put them to ultra or psycho settings. So for all of these, in my opinion, I would just keep them all at high. Screen space reflections, I would keep at ultra, personally. Everything else high. The big deal here is ray tracing. Again, this video is more tailored to RTX cards, so any of the 20 series cards or the 30 series cards. Ray tracing takes this game to another level. Without ray tracing on, it just doesn't look like it just doesn't look very good in my opinion. It looks like a video game from 5 years ago. It does not look like a current gen game. So for me, ray tracing is big deal. If you have a 20 or 30 series card, please turn on ray tracing. You'll notice and love the difference in performance. So ray tracing I have on. Reflections I have on. This is a big one for a lot of people. The reflections, a lot of people I've seen between on and off. Everything else they've kept it on. Reason being with the reflections, just so people know what that is, if you're looking at a puddle, for example, outside, let me see if I can find one real quick for you, but if you're looking at a puddle outside, like here, you can see the reflection, for example, right there, off of the building that comes here in the billboards. If you have that off, that goes away. So for example, if I go into my settings and I turn off ray trace reflections and I come back out, it disappears. So it takes away from that realism. It'll still add the color of it, but it takes away from the actual realism overall. And I've not seen, me personally, a huge difference in performance gain, but it does look very, very much, it just looks better, essentially. Ray trace lighting, if you turn it basically from off to medium to ultra to psycho, it just kind of crisps up the lighting and the edges. I keep mine right in the middle at ultra and it works just fine for me. I haven't really noticed a difference between psycho and ultra. However, when you put it down to medium, you can start to see a little bit of jagged lines. And then the next part is a DLSS. So DLSS is the major part here that's going to make or break this game. If I turn DLSS off, my game runs honestly like shit. It doesn't run very good at all, and I drop about 30 frames. 20, I should say 20 to 30 frames. I'm in this particular spot because this is really where you can notice the difference in DLSS. The performance, yes, is very smooth, but this is where you notice it. So I want you to take a look at the Tom's Diner sign, and I want you to pay close attention to the edges. As you can see right now, there's parts of the edges that kind of clip in and out. It doesn't look very smooth. It's kind of jagged a little bit. This will affect how all of your edges are. So when you're on the streets or you're on illuminated signs, things like that, and writing, because there's a lot of neon in this game, how that looks on the edge, and that's what really is going to make the difference, make a break here for you. So I just want to go through a couple quick DLSS settings to show you. Primarily on a 3090 or a 3080 card, I would stick between performance and balanced. I would never go to ultra performance. So I just want to show you what ultra performance looks like. It absolutely looks terrible. You can notice immediately the differences on how jagged the edges get when I go to that, and how blurred out certain things get, like right here. See how blurred out that is? It's a little bit more blurry. But the big notice is here on the Tom's Diner sign. So from there, I want you to take it and I want you to look up. We go to performance, which increases it a little bit. So I'll go to performance just to show you. Performance doesn't look terrible. It's much better than ultra performance, for sure. However, if we go up to balanced, it's going to get a little bit better. But you notice, you don't really notice a difference between performance and balanced. But you're going to notice a difference in frames. So, my opinion, go to balanced. Or I'm sorry, go to performance, correction. Go to performance. Because there's not much of a difference. I honestly, personally can't really tell the difference. Maybe you guys can. You can play back the video there for a second and see if you can. I can't, to my human eye. So that's up to you. The next one to go up to is going to be essentially quality. Quality looks very crisp and really nice. It's almost perfect, but you are going to take a little bit. I drop about 2 to 3 frames when I go up to quality overall, and it's kind of a little bit of a slower motion for me. It's not as smooth, a little bit jaggy here and there. And then the next option there is auto. So for me personally, I've gone back and forth between auto, but with auto I feel like I kind of get the jagged form of it a little bit. But my main thing is between auto and performance. Most of the time I'm at performance. I believe, based on the upscaling that I've read and I've heard, performance mode will basically put your monitor at 1080p and then upscale it to the 1440. Ultra performance takes you basically from 720 to 1080p, and up and up and up and up you go, obviously all the way up until the quality. This will take you to 1440, up to 4K, etc. So I keep mine realistically in performance because I don't notice a difference between balance and performance, and when I go to quality, it looks great, but I do take a pretty good dip in performance. However, if you turn DLSS off, I want you to notice a big difference, right? So if I turn DLSS off, the game, it's choppy. I'm down to 30 frames per second right now. Keep in mind, I don't have everything at ultra, I don't have everything at psycho. My motion blur looks kind of whack. The game runs very smooth, or not smooth, I mean very jagged. I'm at 30 frames on average on inside a building. If I'm to go outside, it's still raining. Now I'm down into 20 frames per second. This game's big and there's a lot of things going on at a time. But you're going to notice down in the left-hand corner, I'm at 27 to 29 frames. Menus obviously work phenomenal. I'm up in the hundreds. All I need to do is literally change this back to performance and watch the difference. So now I'm going to run about 50 frames here, out and about. Again, this is a very, very crowd populated area, but the game feels very smooth to me. Even though it's showing only 45 to 50 frames, I feel like I'm running at 60 for sure. And then depending on where you go in the game, you'll get more and better performance. So at night, I feel like there's a little bit of less amount of people out and about, but it all just depends overall. Now keep in mind, I'm also recording a video. On average, I'm at 60 frames to 65 when I'm not recording video. So if I'm not recording a video, I'm pretty good. Even when I'm streaming, I'm generally sitting about 65 to 70 frames per second. And at some points in the game, depending, obviously, if there's a lot of motion or non-motion, I'm actually up into the 80s on frames when I'm not streaming or I'm not recording. Right now, I'm assuming I'm taking a dip in performance by about 10 FPS on average, and that's just for the fact that I'm recording, which is sucking a lot of power from my CPU and my GPU. And again, my CPU is not the best of the best. I also don't have Dominator Performance RAM. I do have 32 gigs in this system of Corsair Vengeance. I believe it's 3200 megahertz RAM, but it is not set at that. It's still at the default because I had to reset my BIOS a few days ago, and I believe I'm up to 2800 megahertz, but I have not overclocked it all the way up to 3200. And in previous videos, I've not seen a super increase in performance if I overclock my CPU, so I have no plans on doing that. So these are just the settings that I've had that work well for me for 2560. When I jumped down to 1080p, there's not a magical huge difference either. And I'm sure I could tweak around with VSync, or I could tweak around with maximum frames and things of that nature for recording purposes, and things would work a little bit better. But I just want to give you guys the real actual performance. I'm not some professional studio with all kinds of extra nonsense and super duper things. I'm an average gamer player. I got lucky on a 3090 on how I acquired it because I did not pay anything over retail cost. The processor is really what's holding back my system. I know if I was to increase my processor, I would get better overall performance. The next thing that you can really tweak is that you can go into your Nvidia settings and tweak a couple things in there. Please watch some other videos on that and be careful when you do. Some of it you can tweak. It's not really, honestly, in my opinion, going to make a huge difference overall. The only thing I'll tell you is to watch my previous video, which I'll have linked up here or at the end of the video here and also down below, for the big RTX fix that Nvidia puts in your card by default, that you should definitely change because you don't need it to be on max performance for sure. You're just killing your GPU and you're not getting any more performance out of it. So that's kind of it, guys. That's my video in a nutshell. Sorry for no cam on this one. My stream deck's kind of messed up. It's hard for me to switch back and forth between scenes right now. But I just wanted to guys give you a fix of what that is. I'm hopefully going to bring you guys some Cyberpunk gameplay here. I am streaming 3 days a week on Twitch. You can catch my link below. It'll also flash up here on the screen as well. And if you want to check out some gameplay, I do play at 1440 and run at 60 frames per second, even though Twitch brings me down to 1080p 60. But if you guys want to check out the game, try to watch me on there. I usually play about 8-9 o'clock Central Time. Thank you guys for checking out the video. I have more stuff coming for you soon. If you have any comments, any suggestions, anything you guys want to see, any performance things, any schemes that you guys have of your own hardware, and you want to essentially say, hey, what should I adjust mine to based on what my hardware is? Put your hardware in the comments, and I'll reply back to you. I've had a couple of my friends hit me up on Discord and ask me what they should be running theirs at, and different tweaks and things that I've found. But for most new games that come out, this is a real big thing for me. I always like my videos to be crisp and clean, and I want to show you guys the best that you guys can get. So with that, hit me up if you guys have any comments or any suggestions in the future, or if you guys need help with any of your videos, and we'll get to it. Until then, enjoy the Night City and enjoy Cyberpunk. I'm super excited it's here. I know you guys are too, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.